She checked into the five-star hotel with a platinum card and perfect English. But the receptionist handed her a key to the service elevator. They whispered behind her back, thinking she couldn't understand, until she answered them in fluent Mandarin. What they didn't know, she owned the building next door. And tonight she's here to expose every single one of them. Before we deep dive into this interesting story, subscribe to our channel, and tell us where are you watching from. Share in the comments below. The sliding glass doors of the Wellington Grand Hotel whooshed open with a quiet hush, parting like the gates of a golden palace. The smell of polished marble and $400 a bottle cologne hung in the air like a hush-money whisper. Bellboys in pressed crimson uniforms rushed to open car doors, their white gloves flashing like teeth. A Bentley pulled up, then a black Escalade, and then a sleek, silver Rolls-Royce. From its back seat emerged a woman of poised silence. Liling Shu. She was draped in a tailored white trench coat. Silk scarf knotted perfectly at her throat, her movements deliberate and fluid, like calligraphy in motion. Her almond eyes scanned the ornate lobby ahead. Chandeliers, oil paintings, a live harpist playing Bach near the elevator. It was a palace built to impress, but her presence seemed to disturb its rhythm. Trevor Billings, the general manager in his navy Armani suit, stood behind the concierge desk, arms folded. His eyes narrowed the moment he spotted her. "New tourist," he muttered to Heather, the red-lipped desk agent beside him. Heather glanced up from her screen. "Chinese, I think. Probably here on one of those discount booking sites." Trevor's voice dipped lower. "Keep an eye. If she starts asking for stuff that's not included, redirect her to housekeeping. And don't upgrade her. These types always try to game the system." No one noticed the woman's pause, brief, almost invisible, as she walked past them. But Liling Shu had heard everything. She didn't flinch. Her face remained porcelain smooth. But behind her calm eyes, something shifted. The concierge gave her a forced smile. "Nay, Liling Shu, I have the Emperor suite booked for a 3-night stay," she answered, her English lightly accented but clear. Heather's fingers tapped at her keyboard. Doesn't look like we have you in that suite. Looks like you're in the junior executive. Must be a booking error." She didn't look up. "No, I confirmed it yesterday. Twice," Liling said quietly. Heather sighed, annoyed. "Well, unfortunately, we're full tonight. The junior's a nice room." A silence stretched between them. Liling looked at the screen, then back at Heather. Something flickered behind her eyes. But she nodded once, slowly, and handed over her ID. Behind her, bellboy Darius slung her designer suitcase sideways onto a luggage cart like it was a bag of laundry. The metal edge of her Louis Vuitton trunk scraped loudly on the marble floor. Across the lobby, Renee Collins, a black housekeeper adjusting her supply cart, winced. She had seen it too many times. The whisper racism. The soft erasure. The assumption spoken with fake smiles. She watched as Liling's back straightened, as her chin tilted up a hair's breadth. Not defiance but quiet dignity. And that dignity was being stripped, one condescending smile at a time. Upstairs, the junior executive suite door swung open. It was small. Too small. The windows overlooked an alley. There was no welcome note, no fruit basket, no personalized touch. Liling stepped inside. She took in the dusty lampshade, the smudged bathroom mirror, the stain on the corner armchair. Not the standard she'd built her brand upon. Not even close. She'd once slept in a tent in Tibet, while coding the prototype of her first language AI app. She'd grown up in Guangzhou, raised by a grandmother who mended shoes for a living. Luxury didn't impress her, but disrespect, she never tolerated that. She walked slowly to the window and drew the curtains open, revealing a gray brick wall. Her eyes lingered there for a moment. Then she sat down quietly on the edge of the bed. Her phone buzzed. A message from her assistant. Board meeting rescheduled. Final hotel buyout contracts ready for review. Liling locked her phone. Not yet. Let them show their truth first. Back downstairs, Renee wheeled her cart past the break room. Inside, she heard laughter. "Did you see her scarf?" "Probably a knockoff," Heather joked. Trevor snorted. "They come in rich, but don't tip. Probably paid with a fake Amex." The others chuckled. Renee kept walking. But her stomach turned. She'd cleaned penthouses for billionaires and changed sheets for NBA stars. Racism wore different clothes now. High thread count uniforms and toothy grins. But it still stung like bleach in an open wound. She found herself taking the long hallway back to the service elevator, the one that passed the junior executive rooms. Room 1. She paused outside. A beat of silence. Then she heard movement inside. Liling stood at the minibar. She poured herself a glass of water, slowly, every movement precise. As she turned, her eyes caught her own reflection in the mirror, framed by the cheap lighting, the cracked grout tiles behind her. She stared at herself. She wasn't angry. Not yet. But she was something more dangerous. She was disappointed in their assumptions, in their laziness, in the predictability of it all. They didn't see her. Not really. They saw a foreigner, a woman with an accent, someone other, someone who could be dismissed. They had no idea they had just dismissed the majority shareholder of the Wellington Grand's parent company. Suddenly, Liling walked to her closet. She retrieved a slim, leather portfolio. Inside, floor plans, staff names, photos, notes. She was auditing this location for a potential acquisition. But now she was documenting something deeper. Not bad service, but systemic dismissal. She picked up her phone and began quietly recording her thoughts in Mandarin, cataloging dates, names, behavior, a digital logbook of subtle cruelty. Just then, a soft knock tapped at her door. She turned sharply, wary. Another knock. She opened the door halfway. Renee stood there. Their eyes met. Something passed between them. Silent, fragile, real. Renee said nothing. She simply held out a clean water bottle and a fresh towel. Liling accepted it wordlessly. And for the first time that day, her expression shifted. Her lips parted. A slight nod. Then the door gently closed. That night, as Liling walked slowly across the lobby toward the lounge, guests turned to look. Her long hair shimmered under the golden lights. Her heels clicked against the marble. She passed Trevor, Heather, and a few others standing by the front desk. Their chatter dimmed. Their eyes narrowed. She just walks around like she owns the place, Heather whispered. Trevor laughed under his breath. Good thing she doesn't. Behind them, Renee stood at her cart, frozen. She watched Liling pause at the elevator, her back straight, her silence unbending. The elevator dinged open. Liling stepped in, alone. As the door slid shut, Renee caught it. Just for a second, just before the metal sealed the view, a single tear slipped down Liling's cheek. It wasn't for pain. It wasn't weakness. It was something else, the wound of being unseen. But Renee saw it, and in that moment, she knew. This woman wasn't just any guest. She was something, or someone, far more important than they realized. As the elevator climbed in silence, Liling wiped her cheek and whispered in Mandarin, "Let them keep talking. Their words will be their undoing." Unbeknownst to all, she had never checked in as a guest. She had come to test the soul of this hotel, and they were already failing. The staff break room at the Wellington Grand didn't match the luxury of the rest of the hotel. The walls were plain beige, the table scuffed from years of elbows and coffee mugs. It was where politeness ended, where smiles were shed like uniforms, and the staff's real thoughts came out. It was behind those thin, unglamorous walls that racism morphed from subtext into casual conversation. Heather leaned against the vending machine, sipping a can of Diet Coke, her name badge half twisted. "So get this," she said with a smirk, loud enough to command the room's attention. "She Liling, or Ling Ling, or whatever, comes down earlier, trying to explain something about her booking. I swear it was like listening to a horoscope." The bellboy, Darius, snorted. "What, like very important star rise and moonlight type of thing?" Heather laughed. "Exactly. I was waiting for her to say my aura was out of balance." The others chuckled, some nervously, others eagerly. She stood there with that silk scarf and this serious face, like she owns the place, but can barely string a sentence together. Heather continued. "I mean, come on, it's English, not rocket science." No one noticed the slim figure paused just beyond the break room threshold. Liling, she had intended to ask for the spa schedule, a request she could have easily made through her app, but something had pulled her toward the hallway instead. Now standing still, barely breathing, she listened. Her expression didn't change. She didn't gasp or frown. Her eyes didn't narrow. But her hand, barely visible, slipped into her coat pocket and quietly pressed record on her phone. The muffled laughter behind the door grew louder. "Trevor says she's rich," another staffer chimed in. "But I checked the system, no VIP tags, no flags, nothing." She probably booked through one of those Chinese tour websites. Probably got a deal. Heather scoffed. Please. The way she looked at the wine menu, you'd think she was trying to translate it with Google. This time, someone else asked, so what's the story? She a professor? Investor? Tourist? More like a ghost. Doesn't talk. Doesn't tip. Just floats around like we don't exist, said Darius. She probably thinks we're the help, Heather added with mock horror. Can you imagine? Another round of laughter erupted. Liling quietly stepped back into the hallway. Her phone still recorded. She didn't delete it. Downstairs, Renee Collins pushed her housekeeping cart through the lower corridor. She had just finished restocking the spa towels when she passed the break room. Laughter poured out like smoke from a grease fire, thick and sour. She heard Heather's voice first, then Darius's. Words weren't clear, but the tone was unmistakable. Renee didn't stop walking, but her heart began to pound. It was a tone she knew well, not overt violence, but the kind of dehumanizing glee that always arrived in racially coded language. The kind that started with mocking accents and always ended with denied opportunities. She thought about the woman from the elevator, about that tear, the look in her eyes. Renee's cartwheels squeaked louder as she picked up speed. That afternoon, Liling returned to the concierge desk to ask about the spa. The same smile that welcomed white guests now looked plastic on Heather's face. Oh no, sorry, we're fully booked today. Maybe try again tomorrow? Liling nodded, stepping aside as a white couple approached. The woman asked for a couple's massage. On a whim, Heather gave them a slot. Immediately, Liling watched, then turned away. At the valet stand, her request to have her car brought up was met with confusion. Oh, yeah, we're a little backed up. Can you come back in 30? She nodded again. No reaction. She walked through the lobby as invisible as a shadow. Later that evening, Liling wandered past the concierge, wondering if perhaps she'd misheard. Maybe she had misunderstood the tone. But when she politely asked if someone could help book her a seat at a nearby restaurant, she was told, unfortunately, our concierge is occupied at the moment. You can call the place yourself, or try open table. The words were technically polite, but the message was clear. We don't serve your kind of important. From across the lobby, Renee watched it all unfold, in slow motion. A sudden memory slammed into her like a truck. Flashback 2016. Another hotel, another hallway. Renee, then 25, stood in front of a guest's door holding fresh towels. She'd just won a staff award 2 weeks earlier, her third in 8 months. Her record was spotless. Her manager had told her she was on track for assistant supervisor. Then came the new director, a man in a tailored suit and narrow mind. Within 3 weeks, Renee had been written up twice. Once for being dismissive when she didn't smile enough. Another time for lateness, because the service elevator stalled between floors. She was pulled into HR, accused of having a hostile attitude. No one asked why 2 white coworkers were 10 minutes late every shift. They were just relatable. She was a problem. Renee had taken the demotion, but it had crushed something inside her. She never truly stood straight at work again. Until now. As she turned the hallway near the elevators, she spotted her again, Liling, alone, staring at a display case of fake antiques and hotel trophies. There was something hollow in her eyes. Not sadness, not even pain. Just the quiet ache of being rendered invisible. Renee didn't think. She simply approached. Ma'am, she said softly. Are you all right? Liling didn't turn immediately. But when she did, something shifted. Her eyes locked onto Renee's. A long, silent pause. Then and only then, Liling spoke. Not in broken English. Not in fear. Not in apology, but in flawless lyrical Mandarin. Words flowed like poetry. Sharp, precise, measured. Renee didn't flinch. Instead, to Liling's absolute she answered back. In Mandarin. The hallway fell silent. 2 women, one black, one Chinese, stood face to face in a world that had misunderstood them both. And for the first time, they understood each other. What neither knew was that a hidden security camera nearby had captured the entire exchange, and someone was already watching. The air between them was impossibly still, as if the entire hotel had stopped to listen. Liling's Mandarin had floated into the hallway like incense in a sacred temple. Clear, deliberate, composed. But it wasn't just her words. It was the way she said them. Controlled, powerful, centered. She hadn't spoken to be understood. She had spoken to see who was listening. And Renee had answered. Not with confusion. Not with a tourist's butchered imitation. Her Mandarin was practiced. Steady. Familiar. For a moment both women stared at each other, as if seeing through years of isolation, invisible battles, and quiet compromises, as if behind every subtle nod and soft smile lay volumes of silent stories. Leiling blinked first. You speak Mandarin, she asked, this time in English, low and laced with disbelief. Renee smiled softly. Enough to catch your meaning. A beat of silence. Then, switching back to Mandarin, Leiling asked, where did you learn it? Renee glanced around the empty hallway. Community college. My stepfather was Taiwanese. He raised me after my mom passed when I was 13. He always said, if you love someone, learn their language. A shadow passed behind Leiling's eyes. She took a half step closer, her voice softening. You sound like him. They stood like that, two women of different worlds, joined not by coincidence but by something ancient, rooted, and almost spiritual. Renee gestured toward a service door and guided Leiling discreetly into a side corridor, away from hotel guests and curious glances. It was narrow and poorly lit, but safe from judgment. I need to say this, Renee began, her Mandarin a little rusty, but sincere. I'm sorry. Leiling looked confused. I've seen how they've treated you, Renee continued. How they talk about you when you walk away. How they smile in your face but laugh behind your back. It's not right. Leiling tilted her head. Her eyes were unreadable. I appreciate that, she finally said. But I don't want pity. I want clarity. She paused, then slowly opened her leather handbag, pulling out a slim black phone. She tapped twice and held it up. Dozens of recordings. Break room insults. Concierge mockery. Guests making jokes. Subtle, unmistakable contempt. All in crystal clear audio. I've been documenting every moment since I arrived, she said. I don't react. I don't correct. I just observe. Why? Renee asked, stunned. Leiling met her gaze directly. Because I came to this city for more than rest. She took a breath. I'm here scouting, looking to acquire a chain of properties. The Wellington Grand is part of that portfolio. I never check in as myself when I investigate. I check in as who they assume I am. Renee's eyes widened. You mean this hotel? This exact one? Yes, Leiling nodded. And they're failing the test. Renee leaned back against the wall, the weight of Leiling's words hitting her like a silent earthquake. All this time, the staff had treated her like a disposable foreigner, unaware they were dismissing their potential owner. She shook her head. If Trevor knew who you were, he'd smile wider, Leiling cut in, and the mask would stretch tighter. There was a quiet sadness in her tone, not bitterness but familiarity. Renee swallowed hard. Do you want me to say something? Step in? No, Leiling replied quickly. Not yet. Not until they reveal all of themselves. She reached into her coat and handed Renee a business card. Ivory white, embossed in gold. Shoe Holdings International. Renee flipped it over. On the back, one handwritten line. Change doesn't come by asking. It comes by watching. They stood in silence. Then Leiling spoke again, quietly. I trust you. But our conversations, they stay between us. For now. Renee nodded. Understood. Back in the break room, Heather was scrolling through her phone, eyes half-lidded. Darius nudged her. You see that TikTok with the Asian lady flipping off the valet guy? That's what this one reminds me of. Heather snorted. Let her try it here. She wouldn't last 5 minutes. Trevor walked in just then, loosened his tie, and took a long sip from his coffee mug. Let's just keep everything professional, he said dryly. But yeah, watch the one in the white coat. She's got foreign entitlement. Makes the guests uncomfortable. Back in the corridor, Leiling said almost prophetically, I've built companies in 5 countries. I've coded software that translates 42 languages. But here in this hotel, I'm just a stereotype. Renee's voice cracked. Because that's how they're trained to see us. Until you prove otherwise. Leiling studied her. No, not until you prove you're valuable. And that's the flaw. For a brief moment, Renee considered all the little humiliations she had endured. The awkward silences, the forced apologies, the questions of where are you from, when her accent was pure Brooklyn. The way her supervisors always found reasons to dock her progress too assertive, not polished enough, not quite executive material. Now watching Leiling, elegant, brilliant, calm reduced to nothing more than a walking caricature of foreign. It lit something in her chest. It wasn't rage. It was resolve. These people, she whispered, her voice barely audible in the shadows. They will destroy what they don't understand. Liling turned, slowly. What do you mean? Renee continued, her voice low but firm. They'll chip away at your confidence. Doubt your intellect. Smirk behind your back. And by the time they realize who you are, it'll be too late to undo the damage they've done. Liling nodded once, her expression unreadable. A long silence settled between them. Then she extended her hand. Renee shook it. A quiet contract of understanding passed between them. Sealed not by words, but by shared recognition. They were no longer just a guest and a maid. They were witnesses, allies, architects of exposure. As they returned to their separate roles, the hallway lights flickered briefly, and unbeknownst to both, a silent alarm had been tripped in the hotel's surveillance room. Someone had accessed their corridor's security feed, and someone was watching, zooming in on Renee's face with practiced malice. The velvet-lined doors to Elan, the Wellington Grand's premier restaurant, opened with the hush of wealth. Inside, crystal chandeliers bathed every surface in soft gold. Smooth jazz curled through the air, and menus rested on each table like curated museum pieces. Liling stood at the host stand, dressed in an elegant navy silk blouse and tailored slacks. Her presence was quiet, but commanding. She had made the reservation 2 days earlier. A solo dinner, discreet and early. But the hostess, a young woman with a flawless bun and frosted lip gloss, didn't even look up when Liling gave her name. Sorry. I don't see anything for a Liling Sue. Are you sure it was tonight? The hostess asked, tilting her head with performative politeness. Liling remained calm. Yes. 7 o'clock. For one. The hostess scrolled unnecessarily long. Did you maybe book through a third-party site? No, Liling answered. I called directly. I spoke to someone named Claire. Claire's off today, the hostess replied quickly, still not making eye contact. Unfortunately, we're fully booked. Liling turned to glance at the room. Half the tables sat empty. As if on cue, a man in a gray suit, white, late 50s, balding with confidence, walked in behind her. He wasn't announced. He didn't give a name. He didn't need to. Mr. Marks! The hostess beamed. Welcome back. Your usual table? Gerald Marks chuckled and tapped her shoulder. Of course. Just me and my lady tonight. Give us the good wine view. He and his much younger date were led instantly to a table by the floor-to-ceiling windows. Liling watched them pass. The hostess turned back to her, suddenly remembering she existed. Again, I'm really sorry. Maybe try room service. Liling didn't argue. She simply nodded once and turned away. But her eyes lingered on Gerald's table as she walked out. In the staff hallway, Renee leaned over her cart, whispering into her phone speaker. Reservation under Angela Monroe. Party of one. 7:30 p.m. table. She ended the call and turned the corner, where Liling stood silently. Give it 20 minutes, Renee said softly. Then come back. Name's Angela Monroe. Don't tell them otherwise. Liling met her eyes, hesitated, and then nodded. There was no thank you. There didn't need to be. There was understanding. At exactly 7:32, Liling returned. This time, the same hostess greeted her with sudden cheer. Angela Monroe. Yes, of course, right this way. She was seated at a candlelit corner table, not quite in the center of the room, but not hidden either. The menu was offered. The napkin unfolded in front of her with ceremony. It was all show. But Liling understood something crucial. They respected names, not faces. As she sat, she didn't scan the menu. She scanned the room, the clinking of glasses, the subtle ballet of servers, the hierarchy of glances and greetings. White guests got lingering smiles, short conversations. Guests of color got speed, silence, and distance. Her eyes landed on Gerald Marks, now mid-laugh, gesturing with his wineglass as his date giggled and leaned into his shoulder. Then came the mimicry. I was at this hotel in Singapore. Gerald boomed, just loud enough to be overheard. The staff were all like, ah yes very good You know, every word sounded like it came out of a fortune cookie. His date cackled. He looked around for validation. Some nearby guests chuckled. One server at the bar smirked, trying to hide it behind a cloth. Liling remained still. She sipped her water slowly, deliberately, 10 minutes passed. Gerald's voice grew louder. She probably doesn't even know what's on the menu, he said, nodding toward Liling's table. Bet you $10 she orders noodles just out of habit. His date followed his gaze and whispered something. They both laughed again. The nearby waiter, Jackson, a younger server with gelled hair, passed Liling's table and offered water. Gerald called out casually, "Hey, refill my Lingling's cousin too, will ya?" The comment landed with a thud. Liling didn't react, but behind him, Renee had just entered the restaurant carrying a tray of glassware, temporarily assisting the waitstaff that night. She froze mid-step, her jaw clenched. She walked toward Liling's table, steady and composed, and gently set a crystal water glass down beside her. Liling looked up. Their eyes locked again. Then, for the first time since entering the restaurant, Liling stood. She adjusted her blouse, straightened her posture, and turned toward Gerald's table. Phone in hand, recording app open. She walked, every step crisp, controlled, unhurried. Heads began to turn. Across the room, Gerald continued laughing, oblivious. But as the hush fell, he glanced up and saw her coming. "What's this?" he smirked. "Did I win the fortune cookie prize after all?" But she didn't speak. She reached his table, stopped beside him, and raised her phone just slightly. Gerald blinked. "You recording me? Why?" "I was just making a joke." Liling's voice came low, firm, and without accent. "You didn't joke. You performed racism in a suit and tie." The room went still. No music, no laughter, no clinking glass. Gerald turned red. "Excuse me?" Liling continued, still steady. "You mocked my language, my heritage. You assumed I didn't understand, but I understood everything. Every slur, every snide look." Gerald laughed nervously, looking at the staff for support. "Come on. It's just dinner talk. Lighten up." Liling raised volume on her phone. The last 30 seconds of his voice played clearly. "Lingling's cousin too, will you?" Silent. Renee stood frozen by the door. Other guests watched in discomfort. No one spoke. Then came the unexpected twist. A tall woman with platinum hair from the far side of the restaurant stood up and said, "I heard it too." Gasps. She continued, "I work in civil rights law, and if you want representation, miss, I'm more than willing to assist." Gerald's jaw dropped. The manager came running over, whispering urgently to Gerald, trying to usher Liling away, offering a free dessert. Liling didn't move. She turned her phone toward the manager. "Would you like to apologize on camera, or off record, like you erased my reservation?" The manager stammered. I wasn't involved in that." "Then who was?" she asked flatly. The room waited for his answer. Liling locked eyes with Gerald. "One last time. You mocked a stranger tonight. What will you do when you learn she owns the building you're standing in?" And just as the manager began to speak, the live stream on her phone revealed something no one expected. Over 10,000 viewers watching live, including someone from corporate, who immediately texted Trevor, "We have a problem." The video was only 32 seconds long. No dramatic editing, no music, no effects, just raw, unfiltered humiliation. Captured in HD, Gerald Marks mimicking an accent. The hostess lying, the manager fumbling. A quiet room filled with indifference. And at the center of it all, Liling Shu. She had uploaded it without a single filter or delay, just her phone camera, steady and silent, with one caption: "This is how American hospitality treats you when you don't look like they're elite." No hashtags, no explanation. The truth, when spoken plainly, doesn't need an introduction. By 2 a.m., the post had 80. By 6 a.m., it had crossed 2.2 million. On TikTok, it appeared on nearly every For You page within hours. The comments came in tidal waves, furious, weeping, shouting into the void of injustice. "She's so composed it hurts. Imagine being treated like this when you're richer than everyone in that building combined." That manager stuttered like his job was on the line. "It should be. That's how they treat us. Every day. This ain't new. Protect this queen at all costs. Where is this hotel? I'm never booking here again." The screen recordings multiplied. Activists reposted it. Cultural critics dissected it. Civil rights pages picked it up. Even a few celebrities weighed in. Some subtle, others bold. By mid-morning, Liling's name was trending in 3 countries. She didn't refresh. She didn't reply. She didn't even look at the notifications. Her job wasn't to go viral. Her job was to expose. and that job was done. Inside the Wellington Grand, the air was sharp with panic. Staff scrambled through corridors, whispering, speculating, panicking. Heather was pale. Darius kept asking if he could be seen in the video. The hostess from the restaurant had already called out sick, likely hiding under the weight of digital shame. But no one was angrier than Trevor Billings. He had arrived early, unusually so. Still half-buttoned, eyes bloodshot. He stormed into the office and slammed his laptop open. The video was playing on every major platform. "What the hell is this?" he muttered, jaw tightening as the footage played back for the third time. He slammed his fist against the desk. Heather entered, sheepish. "It's bad." "No kidding." He stared at the screen. "Find out who posted it, where it started. It's all over, and it's verified. Her account's real. Her followers are exploding. It's not a bot job." Trevor's face darkened. Someone inside helped her. Someone gave her the room, the angle, the name. Heather didn't speak, but her glance betrayed a thought. A suspicion. Renee. Within an hour, Renee was summoned to HR. The woman sitting across from her, corporate HR rep Emily Larson, wore a careful mask of concern, not real empathy, the kind of empathy trained into compliance. "We've received a report," Emily began, "that you may have shown inappropriate favoritism to a guest." Renee blinked. "Favoritism?" Emily nodded gently. "There was a guest, Miss Liling Shu." "I know who she is." Emily's brows lifted. "Did you assist her in recording hotel staff?"
No.
"Did you book her an additional table under a false name?" Renee paused, then answered truthfully, "Yeah." Emily leaned forward. "Why?" "Because she was denied one she had rightfully booked." "You acted outside protocol." "No, I acted inside morality." There was silence. Emily smiled, a practiced thin-lipped curve. "You understand this puts us in a difficult position." Renee's jaw tightened. "So does racism." The meeting ended with pending review. But Renee knew what that meant. She'd seen it before, in 3 different hotels, across 2 states. They didn't need to fire you to get rid of you. They just made it impossible to stay. As she returned to her cart, eyes followed her, some sympathetic, most suspicious. A few avoided her altogether, as if exposure were contagious. She felt it, the walls closing in. But she also felt something else. A quiet confidence, just beneath the weight. She had chosen right, and right didn't always keep you safe. Upstairs in room 1045, Leiling stood by the window, her scarf draped across her shoulder, watching as early sunlight kissed the tops of the buildings. Her bag was packed. Her time here was done. But before she left, she knelt beside the bed and pulled a slim envelope from her coat. Inside, a handwritten note, in careful Mandarin brushstrokes. "They will only understand value when it costs them everything." She tucked it under the pillow. The bed was made. The truth had been laid bare. She walked out quietly, heels echoing softly down the hallway, past portraits of smiling founders who had never once smiled at someone like her. Trevor was pacing the office when the call came in. He answered on the first ring. "Trevor speaking." The voice on the other end was calm. Too calm.
Mr. Billings.
"This is Charlotte DeWitt, Executive Director at Crestline Group." His mouth went dry. Crestline owned half the Wellington brand's portfolio. "Yes, ma'am. We were just informed that Shu Holdings has increased their stake in your location from 7% to a controlling majority overnight." Trevor's stomach dropped. "I don't follow," Charlotte continued, her tone crisp. "Your property has been acquired. The transaction finalized early this morning. New ownership will be arriving shortly." He stumbled. "Arriving where?" "Your lobby." Trevor turned toward the office window and watched as a black SUV pulled up to the entrance. Liling stepped out, not as a guest, but as the new owner. Before Trevor could move, his assistant rushed in, breathless. "Sir, the press is outside, and they're asking to speak to Miss Shu, and to the hotel's black housekeeper. They want both women together." The Wellington Grand Hotel had never experienced a quieter morning. Guests moved about with hushed confusion. Staff lingered near doorways, whispering fragments of rumors, and upper management stayed glued to their phones. The front desk phones rang unanswered for the first time in years. Something had broken in the bones of the building. Not a pipe or a wire, but the illusion that power always looked a certain way. Across every screen in the city, one headline flashed in bold. "Shu Holdings acquires luxury hotel chain in sudden takeover. Viral incident cited as catalyst." 9 hotels, including the Wellington Grand, purchased overnight. No warning, no negotiations. A $1 billion move, triggered by a 30-second truth. Trevor Billings hadn't slept. He sat at his desk, face gray and eyes puffy, his tie hanging like a noose around his neck. Sweat soaked the collar of his shirt. He kept refreshing his inbox, looking for some lifeline, some internal memo telling him this was all exaggerated. A PR stunt, a misreport, but each refresh only confirmed it. The woman he'd instructed his staff to keep an eye on, the guest he'd dismissed as a language problem, now owned everything he thought he controlled. And now, she was coming. The front doors to the Wellington swung open. Liling Xu entered without hesitation. She wore a sharp, structured red business suit, no longer the soft elegance of a guest, but the armor of command. Her heels clicked with authority. Her black hair was swept back in a sleek chignon, and a diamond watch glittered beneath her cuff. She didn't wait to be announced, didn't pause at the concierge desk. She walked straight into the lobby, like a queen reclaiming her palace. Behind her, 2 executives from Xu Holdings flanked her like sentinels. A PR rep trailed behind, clipboard in hand. No one greeted her. They were too stunned. Trevor emerged from his office, hastily buttoning his jacket. "Miss Xu," he called out, voice shaky with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Welcome. I wasn't expecting." Liling stopped mid-lobby. She turned slowly to face him. Her voice was calm, measured. "You never saw me," she said. "Only what you assumed." Trevor paled. "I deeply regret. This hotel," she interrupted, "will no longer be a mirror of your bias." From behind a column near the concierge desk, Renee watched it all unfold. Her heart thudded against her chest, each beat a drum of mixed emotions. Awe, fear, pride, confusion. She had helped Liling, spoken to her, protected her. But would that matter now? In corporate reshuffles, loyalty didn't always guarantee safety. She pulled back slightly, hoping not to be noticed. But Liling's eyes found her through the crowd, just for a second, then moved on. Within the hour, the ballroom was transformed into a media chamber. Reporters from major outlets filled the room, microphones pointed, cameras rolling. The chandeliers glittered like stage lights. The marble floors had been polished to a mirror finish, but even that couldn't hide the tension clinging to the air. Liling stepped up to the podium. The flashbulbs exploded. Her voice came steady and crisp. "My name is Liling Xu. I am the founder and majority shareholder of Xu Holdings International. I am also the proud new owner of the Wellington Grand and 8 other properties under this brand." Reporters murmured. Pens scribbled. "I came here unannounced. I was treated not as a guest, but as a foreign problem, a walking stereotype. I was overlooked, ignored, mocked by people trained to smile through their prejudice." She let that settle. Trevor shifted uncomfortably at the edge of the ballroom. "I do not seek revenge," Liling continued. "I seek reform. Effective immediately, all 9 hotels will undergo a diversity audit. Department heads will be reassessed. Bias training will become mandatory. Promotion pipelines will be restructured." She looked directly at the cameras, "and management will be held accountable." Trevor's jaw clenched. A reporter stood. "Miss Xu, what does that mean for current leadership?" Liling's lips barely moved. "Mr. Trevor Billings' position is under review." The crowd erupted with murmurs. Phones buzzed. Hashtags formed in real time. From the back, Renee slowly stepped out of the shadows. Her eyes didn't leave the woman at the podium. She had never seen anyone like this. Not in power. Not this visible. Not this unapologetic. And then something stranger happened. Liling ended the press conference with a simple bow. A cultural gesture that felt both humble and unshakable. But as she turned to leave, she didn't walk toward her executives. She walked straight toward Renee. The staff watched, stunned. Eyes followed every step. Renee froze. Her pulse sprinted. Was this it? Was she about to be dragged into another spotlight? This time for stepping out of her place. Liling reached her, paused. Then, without raising her voice, she said 2 words that landed like a gavel. "Come upstairs." They walked in silence, up through the elevator. Past the suites Renee only ever cleaned. Past the penthouse she had never stepped foot in. She felt the eyes of the world following her, even in private. The doors opened into Suite 2401, the presidential. Sunlight bathed the suite in golden hues. Mahogany furniture gleamed. A glass bar sparkled with untouched crystal. Liling motioned to a seat. Renee sat, shoulders square, trying not to tremble. Liling didn't sit immediately. She walked to the window and looked out over Manhattan. The city stretched infinitely, indifferent to the dramas unfolding beneath it. I know what you're wondering, Liling said softly, still facing away. Renee stayed silent. Liling turned. You think you're next? Renee's throat tightened. I don't expect anything. Liling's expression didn't soften, but something in her eyes shifted. Respect, perhaps, or understanding. Good, she said, because I'm not offering you pity. She reached into her folder and slid a cream envelope across the table. Renee opened it. Inside, a formal letter. Shoe Holdings letterhead. A job offer. Director of Guest Experience, Wellington Grand Hotel. Her breath caught. This hotel doesn't need more managers, Liling said. It needs listeners. People who see what's happening while others are looking away. Renee stared down at the letter. I'm not qualified, she whispered. Yes, you are, Liling replied firmly. You just never had the luxury of being seen that way. Renee clutched the offer letter, her world tilting with the weight of possibility. But before she could speak, Liling's phone buzzed on the table. She glanced at the screen, and her jaw tightened. It's Trevor, she said coldly. He's just filed a complaint against you. Renee stood outside Suite 2401, with her fingers trembling against the doorframe. The thin gold placard gleamed under the hallway lights. Presidential Suite. She had knocked once. Softly. Now she waited. The seconds stretched like hours. Behind her, the echo of Trevor's complaint, still fresh in her mind, wrapped around her ribs like a vice. She'd seen the tactic before. It always looked the same. You speak up, you stand out, and then someone shifts the narrative. Insubordinate, aggressive, unprofessional. The complaint wouldn't be about her work ethic. It never was. It would be about her tone, her attitude, or more precisely, her audacity to matter. She didn't know what she expected from Liling now. Gratitude, doubt, distance. But as the door opened and the soft glow of the suite spilled out, it wasn't dismissal that greeted her. It was invitation. Liling stood tall, her face unreadable, phone still in hand. Come in, she said calmly. Renee obeyed, stepping over the threshold like it might vanish beneath her feet. The suite was silent, heavy with unsaid things. Liling set the phone down on the desk beside her and gestured to the armchair across from her. You saw the complaint. Renee nodded once. Of course. Do you know what it says? No, but I know how it's written. I've had them written about me before. Liling sat. Trevor claims you manipulated guest bookings, accessed staff-only records, and collaborated to smear the hotel's reputation. Renee clenched her hands. And you believe that? I believe what I've seen, Liling replied evenly. And I've seen you speak with integrity when it cost you comfort. That's rare. The words didn't soothe Renee. Not yet. Praise often preceded polite dismissal. So why am I here? She asked, voice quiet but tight. Liling didn't smile. She didn't soften. She simply opened a folder and slid a document across the table. It wasn't an HR notice. It wasn't a termination letter. It was a formal employment contract. Director of Guest Experience, Liling said, tapping the title. Full authority over lobby operations, concierge flow, cultural liaison protocols, and staff inclusion initiatives. Renee blinked. Wait, this isn't a warning? No. She stared at the offer. Her heart began to pound. This can't be real. It is, Liling said. You earned this. Renee exhaled a breath she didn't know she was holding. She stared at the paper as if it might disappear if she looked away. Then, I don't have a degree in hospitality. I've never led a team. You've seen more of this hotel's soul than any resume will ever tell me. Liling interrupted. You listened when no one else did. That's what transforms experience into leadership. The room quieted. Renee's eyes watered, but she blinked it away. I don't want to be a symbol, she whispered, or a shield. Then don't be, Liling replied. Be a bridge. Renee's fingers grazed the edge of the paper. The words blurred slightly, but their meaning hit hard. It wasn't just a title. It was proof she wasn't invisible anymore. I'll accept, she said finally. But I have one condition. Liling raised an eyebrow. I want hiring authority. I want to rebuild this staff, not with who looks good on paper, but with people who reflect the city. New York is black. It's brown. It's immigrant. It's queer. It's real. I want that on every floor. A long silence followed. Liling nodded. Done. The contract was signed before the hour was out. The next morning, Renee walked into the office that used to be locked to her. It still smelled like cedar polish and old prejudice. But her name was now on the door. Renee Collins, Director of Guest Experience. She stood in front of the frosted glass for a long second, before pushing it open. Inside, a new desk, fresh folders, her welcome packet from Shoe Holdings, and a small vase of fresh orchids. She touched the petals like she was afraid they weren't real. But what stopped her cold wasn't the flowers. It was the note on her chair. Folded, unaddressed. She picked it up. A single word scrawled across it in black marker. Traitor. Renee stared at the word, her grip tightening. But what she didn't know, not yet, was that a second note had been slipped under Leiling's door, that same morning, and that one didn't call her a traitor. It said something else entirely. We know what she did. Check her past. For all its marble lobbies, crystal chandeliers, inscripted smiles, the Wellington Grand had never been more fragile. Something had cracked beneath the gold trim. Not visibly, not in the public areas, but behind the service halls, in whispered conversations, break-room side-eyes, and thinly veiled sarcasm. The resentment was growing like mold behind luxury wallpaper. It wasn't just about Leiling anymore. It was about her, Renee Collins. The housekeeper who had become a director. To some she was proof that change had gone too far. To others she was the reason they stopped trusting the mirror. It began with whisper campaigns. She only got the job because she speaks Chinese. One said, I heard she's sleeping with corporate. Another added under their breath, she's just a placeholder. They'll cycle her out once the noise dies down. But the whispers didn't stay quiet for long. Renee began noticing patterns. Emails she had sent to the concierge team, suddenly missing when she followed up. Spa bookings she approved, erased from the system. Guest complaints falsely linked to her name. Even her supply cabinet, the one she had organized by the hour on her first week, was now routinely missing key items. Towels, toiletries, robes. Just enough to create delays, enough to provoke questions. She kept a journal of every strange occurrence. But doubt crept in anyway. One morning, as she greeted a guest from Ghana at the check-in desk, she overheard a staffer murmur to another one for the diversity circus. She turned. They smiled, pretended they were discussing the jazz playlist. Later that afternoon she received her first anonymous guest complaint, claiming she had spoken with aggressive body language and made a guest uncomfortable with her tone. The guest didn't exist. It wasn't even a room that was occupied that day. But the file was logged. HR flagged it anyway. Just standard protocol, they said. And the guests, some of them weren't quiet either. 3 corporate bookings canceled within a week. One wrote directly in their feedback, "We're uncomfortable with the new activist atmosphere of your hotel." Another emailed the front desk, "I come here to escape the noise, not be educated." Renee read every word. Her office door, freshly installed, freshly painted, began to feel like a cage. She leaned against it one night. Past midnight, the only sound the quiet hum of the city outside. Her voice broke into the stillness. "Is this worth it?" she whispered. No one answered. The next morning, Leiling entered Renee's office unannounced. She didn't knock. She just walked in, holding 2 coffees, one for herself, one for Renee. "I know," she said softly. Renee didn't even pretend to ask what she meant. "They're not subtle," Renee murmured. "They don't need to be," Leiling replied, "because they think silence protects them." Renee stared into her coffee. "It's like they're waiting for me to fail so they can say it was inevitable." "They're not waiting," Leiling said. "They're working on it." Renee met her eyes. "Then why keep me here? Why not replace me with someone who fits better in their world?" "Because you were never hired to fit," Leiling said. "You were hired to shift." A long pause. Then Leiling added, quietly but firmly, "Change only hurts when it works." That afternoon Renee returned to her office after a long floor inspection. The orchids on her desk were wilting. Her inbox was full, half of its spam reports flagged as urgent. She sorted through them quickly, dismissing what she could. But one email caught her attention. It had no subject line, just an attachment. A PDF. She opened it. It was a termination report. From her last hotel job, 3 years ago. The one she'd fought to keep sealed. The one that had never made it to court but had shadowed every interview since. But something was off. The document had been altered. Where once it listed poor communication and repeated tardiness, already false claims, It now included new language. Language that wasn't just professional character assassination. It was racial. Phrases like loud and confrontational in a stereotypical way. Combative attitude often observed in lower-income black staff. Better suited for urban labor positions. Her breath stopped. Someone had rewritten her past, and they had sent it to her like a warning. She printed the report, held it in her hands like a poisoned letter. It wasn't just about humiliating her. It was a threat. A reminder. They didn't need to fire her if they could erase her legitimacy. She stared out the window for a long time. She didn't cry. Not yet. But something inside her shifted. Again. If this was war, they were done playing subtle. As Renee reached for her coat to confront Liling, her phone buzzed with a restricted number. She answered cautiously. A deep voice on the other end said, "Only this. You're not the only one they buried. Meet me in the surveillance room at midnight. Come alone." Midnight. The Wellington Grand was silent, its hallways hushed under the weight of dark velvet carpeting and dimmed chandeliers. It was a different building at night, stripped of its performative polish, revealing the quiet machinery underneath. Renee moved quickly through the staff corridors, coat tight against her body, her mind spiraling with what the anonymous call had promised. "Meet me in the surveillance room at midnight. Come alone." The card reader beeped as she approached the lower-level security wing. Her badge had been updated days ago when she was promoted, but this was her first time using it to access the camera archives. Behind the door, rows of monitors flickered with grainy feeds of elevators, hallways, stairwells, and lobbies. The scent of coffee and old carpet lingered. Inside stood Marcus Hale, the black IT manager, tall with square glasses, his hoodie zipped halfway up despite the warmth. He looked up when she entered. "I didn't call you," he said before she could speak. Renee froze. "Wait, what?" "I didn't call you," he repeated, quieter this time, locking the door behind her. "But I know who did." He turned to the terminal, tapping keys. "And they were right. You need to see this." Marcus's fingers moved quickly over the keyboard, navigating through file layers Renee didn't even know existed. "You've been wondering if someone's been planting things," he said. "I started tracking anomalies in the internal access logs 3 days ago. Deleted files. Redirected approvals. Email pings with wrong IP stamps." He looked at her over the rim of his glasses. "They were scrubbing your digital fingerprints." Renee leaned forward, barely breathing. "Watch this," he said. On the screen appeared a hallway timestamped from the previous week. A guest approached the front desk. It was Gerald Marks. He wasn't wearing the same smug grin as before. This time he wore a mask of calculated cordiality. A large manila envelope tucked under one arm. He leaned over the counter and handed it to the receptionist. A quiet exchange. A nod. No words picked up. But the footage was enough. "Pause it," Renee said. Marcus complied. "Zoom in on the envelope." He did. Across the front, in sharp black ink. "For executive management only. Private." Marcus clicked again. That envelope was signed in. Then it vanished from the log. "Who received it?" Renee asked. Marcus pulled up the sign-in ledger. The initials TB. Trevor Billings. Renee exhaled slowly, her heartbeat now a war drum in her chest. "This is it," she said. "This proves it. The smear campaign. The sabotage. He's behind all of it." Gerald paid him off. But Marcus didn't nod. He looked uneasy. "I told you I didn't call you. But someone else knew what I was digging for." He hesitated. "And they wanted you to see this too." He tapped again, this time accessing archived footage from over 2 years ago. The old system wasn't meant to keep more than 90 days of video. But someone, I'm guessing your boss, installed auto backups on the private server when they updated the cameras. A new video loaded. The lobby. Grainier. Darker. A younger staff lineup behind the desk. The timestamp read January 15th. Trevor walked into frame. He was in a makeshift costume, some kind of skit or theme event. But what he wore wasn't a costume. It was blackface, painted sloppily on his face. He grinned, fake accent and all, performing to a group of cackling staff. The words were barely audible but unmistakable. "Ni hao, welcome to the buffet. All you can eat, but no dog. Only dragon." The laughter roared off-screen. Another staff member doubled over laughing. One filmed on their phone. The others didn't stop it. They joined in. Renee recoiled, her stomach turning. Marcus closed the video, disgusted. That was 3 weeks before an Asian guest filed a racism complaint, and disappeared from the guest logs. The room fell silent. Renee stared at the black screen. "This man," she said quietly. "This man's been playing innocent while erasing people." She turned to Marcus. "How long have you known this was here?" "Too long," he admitted. "I couldn't touch it without risking everything. But you might actually be able to bring this to light." Renee stood, the weight of what she'd just seen curling around her chest like a vice. She reached for her phone. "I need to show this to Leiling." But Marcus stopped her. "Wait." He turned the monitor back on and brought up one more file. "I found something else," he said. "From last night." The video played. The hallway outside Renee's office. A man slipped a note under her door. He wore a cap, hoodie, head down. Marcus paused it. "Zoom in on his badge," Renee whispered. The screen sharpened. The name read, Ethan Clark, Assistant Manager of Housekeeping. A name she hadn't thought about twice. Marcus looked at her. "He's the one who added the racial slurs to your past file. He used your unlocked terminal during a shift last week." Renee's throat tightened, and the camera caught him. She sat down, stunned, the world around her spinning like a wheel she'd once tried to break. They had plotted every step, planted every seed, smiled in her face while twisting knives behind her back. But now they were exposed, one frame at a time. Renee backed away from the monitors, breath shallow. "We take this to Leiling. Tonight." But as Marcus stood to follow her, the screen behind them flickered. A live feed from the loading dock lit up, and on it Gerald Marks was back, alone, holding another envelope. At 9:42 a.m., every department head, supervisor, assistant manager, and concierge staff member received the same message. Mandatory meeting. Ballroom A. Immediate attendance required. No subject line. No explanation. Just the unmistakable signature of Shoe Holdings. At the bottom. By 10 hours in a.m., the ballroom was filled. The long banquet tables had been replaced with rows of black chairs, facing a single screen suspended from the ceiling. A podium stood to one side, unoccupied. No refreshments, no music, just the scent of nerves, polyester suits, and corporate panic. Whispers moved like wind through the crowd. "What's going on? Is this about the video? Is it layoffs?" Trevor stood near the back, arms folded, jaw tight. He hadn't received any warning either, which for a man used to orchestrating every meeting down to the menu, made him deeply uneasy. Heather sat 2 rows ahead, scrolling her phone with a painted calm she didn't feel. Near the side wall, Renee stood next to Marcus. She said nothing, but her fingers twitched at her side, pulsing with adrenaline. She'd barely slept, barely eaten. Today was the day the masks came off. At 10:07, Leiling entered. She wore white. A tailored suit, crisp, minimal, immaculate. The color wasn't symbolic. It was intentional. In many Asian cultures, white wasn't purity. It was mourning. She didn't take the podium. Instead, she walked to the front row and took a seat facing the crowd. A silence dropped like a curtain. Then the lights dimmed, and the screen flickered on. The first video played. It was the restaurant incident. Gerald Marks mimicking an accent. The hostess denying a reservation. The staff laughing behind Leiling's back. Some in the room shifted uncomfortably. A few hung their heads. The second clip. Security footage of Gerald returning days later, handing off an envelope time-stamped face visible staff log confirmed. Then came the audio files. Heather mocking Leiling's English, calling her Ling Ling, joking about fortune cookie talk. Others joined in, laughed. The room's temperature dropped 10 degrees. Next, the fabricated complaint against Renee, a screenshot of the fake guest log, an overlay showing the room was unoccupied, another showing it was Heather's login, used to submit. She looked up sharply. "That's not possible." Marcus stepped forward from the side of the room. "It's your staff ID, your IP address, logged from the main concierge station. Date and time stamped." Heather flushed. I was probably hacked." No one responded. Then, without warning, the final video began. Trevor, in blackface. Laughter in the background. His voice performing a caricature. Staff clapping. The air was sucked out of the room. Trevor stood instantly. "This is taken out of context," he barked. "It was a costume party. No guests were present." Leiling stood. "No guests needed to be present. Your audience was your staff. And your message was clear. Mockery isn't punished here. It's applauded." Trevor looked around, eyes wild. Come on. This is ridiculous. This was 2 years ago, and I didn't approve any of those fake complaints. That must have been someone else. Liling nodded toward the screen again. An internal memo flashed. Trevor's signature approving the disciplinary consideration for Renee. Another slide. Trevor's login viewing. Renee's sealed termination history. Another. His approval of Heather's hiring despite lack of senior concierge credentials. Shows internal loyalty. The silence grew heavier than stone. Heather's voice cracked. I didn't mean for any of it to escalate like this. I was just joking. Everyone laughs about accents. It's just part of... She didn't finish. A woman in the back stood up. An older staff member, Indian, longtime housekeeper. Her voice was soft but resolute. You think we laugh? We don't. We just smile so we don't get fired. Another staff member, Latino, maintenance, stood beside her. I've worked here for 7 years. Never once considered for a promotion. You know what my last evaluation said? Hard worker, unrefined demeanor. What does that even mean? More voices followed. Not yelling, just truths, quiet and sharp. I've had my schedule cut for budget 3 times, but newer hires kept full hours. I was told to change my name on the badge to something easier to pronounce. They said my accent was a barrier to upward mobility. One by one, the confessions spilled. Some staff sat frozen, stunned by what they had allowed. Others stood and walked out. Silent. Ashamed. Exposed. Renee remained still. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. The damage was now visible to all, and yet something inside her still felt empty. Justice, she thought, wasn't always satisfying. It was necessary, but not healing. She looked at Heather, now slumped in her seat, trembling. She looked at Trevor standing alone, sweating, cornered, still trying to strategize his way out. She looked at the staff, some shocked into silence, others processing years of gaslighting that had suddenly been validated. This wasn't closure. This was opening the wound. Liling returned to the front. She didn't need the microphone. Her voice, though soft, carried. Silence, she said, is not neutrality. It's participation. It's complicity. She paused. Today is not about firing people. Today is about forcing acknowledgement. She let that settle. Then she added, but accountability must follow. She turned to the side screen and nodded. The display changed. A countdown appeared. Under it, public statement upload in progress, scheduled for live broadcast. Gasps. This is going to the press, someone whispered. Yes, Liling said. At noon today, everything, every video, every log, every name. Then she turned toward Renee. And it won't be written by lawyers. She held up a folder. It's written by me and Renee Collins. The entire room turned. Renee's breath caught in her throat. You're the only one I trust to sign this truth with me, Liling said, her tone unwavering. Will you? Renee stepped forward slowly, all eyes watching. She took the folder, opened it. Inside, the statement. Bold. Direct. Not polished. Powerful. She picked up the pen and signed her name. As the room stood in stunned silence, Renee closed the folder, but her phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out. A message. No name. Just a photo. A screenshot of her sealed juvenile record, and a caption, Want to be a hero? Let's open all your doors. The video was shot in one take. No cuts. No edits. No re-recordings. Just a wide shot of 2 women seated side by side in front of a dark blue backdrop. Liling Shu in a cream silk blouse, flawless as ever. Renee Collins in a simple black dress, her hands folded in her lap. A single microphone between them. A single truth about to be told. It began with Liling, her voice calm, her cadence sharp. I walked into the Wellington Grand as a guest. I was treated like a liability. A problem to be managed. Because of how I looked. Because of how I spoke. Because I did not match the profile of what this hotel considered worthy. She paused. I own this hotel now. The sentence hung heavy. But this isn't about revenge. This is about recognition. Of who we see. And who we ignore. Then she turned slightly, nodding to Renee. Renee's throat tightened. She hadn't rehearsed this part. Not really. The words came from somewhere deeper than planning. From the wounds themselves. I started here pushing carts, she said, her voice shaking but steady. I was a housekeeper for 6 years. I kept my head down, smiled when I wanted to scream, stayed silent when I was overlooked. Because that's what survival looked like for me. She swallowed. I was passed over. Labeled difficult. Called aggressive for saying the same things a man in a suit would be praised for. Another breath. And then one day, I saw someone else being erased in real time, and I decided I wouldn't watch it happen again. Liling reached out and gently took Renee's hand. Now I sit in the executive suite. Not because I changed who I was, but because I finally had someone who saw me. By noon, the video had been viewed 3. By evening, it hit 12 million. Hashtags surged. Hotel justice. Renee was right. Who gets to be seen? Sure change. It became more than a story. It became a movement. People flooded the comment sections with their own testimonies. Black women passed over in interviews. Asian immigrants ridiculed at luxury counters. Brown employees called unprofessional for their accents. The video had opened a collective scar, and the world was watching. Media outlets picked it up by the hour. CNN replayed the clip during prime time. BuzzFeed ran a full spread titled, "How a Housekeeper and a Billionaire Are Rewriting Hospitality's Future." Activist pages reposted. Celebrities commented. Former employees from other Wellington properties sent in anonymous stories. Former guests pledged to boycott until a company-wide review was issued. The ripple became a roar, and outside the Wellington Grand, the silence shattered. Protesters gathered on the marble steps. Signs held high. "We clean your rooms, but you don't see us. Not just housekeepers, human beings. Respect has no accent." The line to speak with reporters stretched into the street. The Wellington, once a silent symbol of elitism, was now a battleground for accountability. Inside, in a press room hastily assembled beside the lobby, Liling stood again before cameras. But this time, there was no mention of punishment. No new firings. Only a plan. "I am proud to announce the launch of the Shoe Institute for Inclusive Hospitality," she said. "A training center for aspiring hotel professionals from underserved communities, designed to reimagine what hospitality leadership can look like." The press murmured. It was bold, ambitious, and exactly what no one expected. Liling continued, "And leading this institute will be Renee Collins." Renee's breath caught. This hadn't been discussed. Liling turned toward her. "Because transformation starts with those who've lived through the problem and survived it." The applause began slowly, then grew. But not everyone clapped. That night, in a sterile downtown office filled with wood-paneled arrogance, Gerald Marks sat across from a polished attorney in a pinstripe suit. He slid a printed still frame across the desk, his face mid-speech, caught in Liling's viral video. "I want them sued," he said, "for defamation, for libel, for ruining my name." The lawyer glanced at the image. "Mr. Marks, you said those things. On camera." "I was baited," Gerald snapped. "I was provoked. They used your words. Unedited." Gerald's eyes narrowed. "Then we sue for emotional distress. This isn't about winning. This is about making it messy." Back at the hotel, Renee sat in the dim light of her office. The world outside celebrated, but inside her chest, the quiet tension never left. She was grateful. She was empowered, but she was being watched. The photo she received at the hearing of her sealed juvenile record hadn't come with a sender. No threat. Just implication. She had made it to the top floor, but the claws of her past were scratching at the door. And then, it escalated. At 3:14 a.m., a noise outside jolted her awake. Her phone buzzed. Security alert. She threw on a sweatshirt and rushed downstairs. In the back parking lot, under the flicker of a dying lamp, her car sat vandalized. Windows shattered, paint scratched. A single sheet of paper taped to the windshield. Black marker, bold letters. "You made the wrong enemies." Renee stared at the words. No anger, just clarity. This wasn't about her being right. This was about her being visible. And visibility always had a price. As security escorted her back inside, Renee's phone buzzed again. This time it wasn't a threat. It was a Google alert. A new article. Headline, "Renee Collins Arrest Record. Unsealed. Who is the woman behind the viral speech?" The first time it happened, Renee thought it was a coincidence. A white SUV trailing a little too close behind her down 7th Avenue. Headlights dimmed. No lane change. No horn. The second time, when it slowed as she turned into her apartment complex and stopped at the edge of the lot, it felt less like coincidence and more like surveillance. By the third night, she stopped pretending it wasn't happening. She took the long way home, changed her parking spot, double-checked her locks. But paranoia doesn't always wear a mask. Sometimes it walks behind you at just the right distance. Sometimes it lingers by the elevator and pretends to check its phone. Sometimes it doesn't need to do anything at all, because fear thrives on possibility. Renee filed a police report the following morning. The officer at the front desk barely looked up from his keyboard. Was anything said to you? Threats? Contact? No, Renee replied, trying to keep her voice calm. Just following. Same vehicle. Same timing. He shrugged, hard to build a case on that. I have license plate photos. He clicked his pen lazily. We'll flag it. Probably just a rideshare. Happens all the time. She stared at him. He didn't look back. The message was clear. You are not a priority. When Renee told Liling she expected a calculated plan, not emotion, but Liling's hands clenched around her tea glass before she even finished the sentence. I'm hiring you private security, she said, standing immediately. You don't have to. I do. Because I know this playbook. It's not just intimidation. It's erasure. She walked to her desk, pulled out a folder, and flipped it open. Inside were security firm proposals already drafted. As if she'd been expecting this moment. I should have done this sooner, she said quietly. Renee looked down at the folder. Armored vehicles, private patrol, secure entry protocols. It felt excessive, embarrassing, but it also felt like being protected. For the first time in her life, the media storm hadn't slowed. In fact, the backlash was evolving. The moment Renee's juvenile record was unsealed, a protest arrest from when she was 17, it lit another fire. News headlines blurred the line. Renee Collins, executive or ex-offender. The other side of hotel justice hero emerges. From cell block to boardroom, who is the real Renee? Every article sliced her story into digestible scandal. They skipped the protest's context, her brother's wrongful arrest, her role in the sit-in, the fact that charges were dropped before trial. They just printed arrested. It wasn't about truth anymore. It was about discrediting the narrative. Meanwhile, Liling's team dug deeper into Gerald Marks, and what they found peeled the mask off with surgical precision. Campaign donations, board positions, photos from private fundraisers. Gerald wasn't just a hotel investor. He was a silent engine behind far-right lobbying groups. Organizations with dog whistle platforms and camouflaged racism. One of them had funded anti-immigrant billboards in Arizona. Another had lobbied against affirmative action in higher education. And buried deep in the financial reports, donations to a PAC with ties to known hate groups. The same man mocking Asian accents over wine. The same man trying to silence Renee with lawsuits. The same man who'd tried to buy his way out of a reckoning. Renee stared at the reports in Liling's office, her jaw tight. He's not just trying to ruin me, she said. He's protecting a machine. Liling nodded. Exactly. And machines don't stop unless something breaks them. So they decided they would countersuit. Not for money. Not for settlement, but to expose, to drag every hidden connection, every racially coded complaint, every backdoor meeting and shadow fund into the light. They weren't just fighting for themselves anymore. They were fighting for every invisible employee, still folding towels in silence. The courtroom was packed on the first day. Pressed, protesters, passers. Liling wore navy, crisp, armor-like. Renee wore black. No jewelry, no fanfare, just resolve. The judge called the room to order. Gerald sat across the aisle with smug detachment. His lawyer, an older man with steel gray hair and reptilian charm, smiled thinly. Your Honor, he began. We'd like to begin discovery by requesting Miss Collins' complete employment history. All disciplinary actions, previous terminations, sealed or otherwise. Liling stood. That's unrelated to the defamation suit. But the judge allowed it. Past behavior speaks to character, Gerald's lawyer said, barely hiding his grin. We simply want context. The documents were presented in a sealed envelope. Renee's hands clenched under the table. She didn't need to open them. She already knew what they contained. Not just the termination report rewritten with racial slurs, but her juvenile arrest. Her face, 17, defiant, handcuffed outside a police station. The courtroom fell still. Gerald's lawyer looked at the judge. Your Honor, we submit that the plaintiff's emotional distress is directly tied to a smear campaign, conducted by a known activist with a history of disorderly conduct and employment infractions. He paused, then twisted the knife. Perhaps Miss Collins should be the one on trial. The silence wasn't just heavy. It was historic. Renee's chest burned. Not with shame, she had shed that long ago, but with rage. This was the system at work. Not the justice system. The silencing system. Leland leaned in. You can walk away, she whispered. I'll take the heat. We can settle. Clean. Renee shook her head. No. She stood, and in front of the room, voice steady, eyes unblinking, she said, when I was 17, I was arrested protesting my brother's wrongful detainment. We were told we didn't belong in that neighborhood. They called us loiterers. We were waiting for our bus. She turned to the jury. I was charged, cuffed, and processed. It was the first time I saw a system try to erase a black girl before she even had a resume. Her voice cracked. But I didn't get erased. I survived. And I won't be silent now just because power is uncomfortable being questioned. She looked at Gerald. And I don't fear men who hide behind money. I fear what happens if we stop exposing them. The courtroom didn't applaud, but something shifted. The air thickened. Even the judge leaned forward. Lips pursed, eyes sharper. The smear campaign had landed, but so had the truth. Outside the courtroom, as reporters swarmed for quotes, a woman brushed past Renee. She pressed a folded paper into her palm and whispered, "There's more. Check the archives from 2018. You'll find what Gerald paid to bury." The courtroom lights felt harsher the next morning. Not brighter. Just exposing. Renee stood at the defendant's table, her name freshly sullied across media scrolls, headlines written in half-truths, and dog whistles. The photo they used was from her high school ID. No makeup, no smile. Afro pulled back in defiance. The kind of image that fit neatly into the narrative they were building. Angry. Aggressive. Unruly. Violent activist. Gerald's attorney said aloud, reading from the motion filed overnight. Ms. Collins was arrested during a disruption of public order. She resisted detainment. She shouted slurs at law enforcement. Her record may be juvenile, but her disposition remains on full display. Renee didn't move. Not when they misquoted her. Not when they lied. She had stood at that protest when her brother, age 15, had been tackled and detained for acting suspicious in front of a convenience store. She had yelled. Yes. Not slurs, truths. And the system hadn't liked her volume. Liling sat in the front row of the courtroom, fists curled tightly in her lap. Renee's arrest had never come up before. Not in their private talks. Not in her interview. Not even when the background check came through. It had been sealed. But someone had spent real money to unseal it. And Gerald had waited to use it. Just long enough to let the world embrace Renee. So that when he exposed her, it would feel like betrayal. Like they had cheered too soon. But what he didn't realize was this. The world had changed since and Renee had not broken. The judge looked up from the file. Ms. Collins, do you wish to respond? Renee stood. No lawyer. No paper. Just her voice. Yes, Your Honor. She turned to the jury. Then to the packed benches. I was arrested for protesting police brutality. Not for burning cars. Not for throwing bricks. I stood in front of the station with a sign that said, "My brother is not a threat." Her voice shook for the first time. He had been stopped while walking home with a Slurpee. No weapons. No curse words. Just brown skin and a backpack. She swallowed, eyes glossing, but unbroken. They told me I was disturbing the peace. That I was escalating the situation. That my voice, the one asking why, was the real danger. The room was silent. I was 17. I was black. I was not sorry. And I'm still not. Leiling's legal team moved swiftly. Within an hour they had reframed the motion and filed a formal opposition. Renee Collins' arrest was not a threat to order. It was an act of courage in the face of abuse. The response included court transcripts from her juvenile hearing, news clippings from the time, and a statement from the community leader who had marched beside her that day, now a state senator. It went viral within minutes. Across social media, the backlash flipped. She was arrested for protesting brutality, not causing it. So standing up for your brother makes you unfit for leadership. They tried to bury her at 17. She just gave the world a shovel. By the end of the day, Renee was framed trended nationally. Public opinion shifted hard, not just in her favor but against Gerald. Gerald Marks watched the digital chaos unfold from a dark paneled office, jaw clenched as his legal team whispered about reputational exposure. One of his associates leaned in. "Sir, we may need to consider settlement." He turned sharply. "No, I want her destroyed. I want the hotel, the board, everything." But what he didn't know was that his control had already started to slip. The judge declined to remove Renee's testimony from the record. And by the following week his own corporate sponsors began quietly pulling their support. Then came the twist no one saw coming. An email landed in Renee's inbox. No subject line, just a name in the sender bar. Harper and Renly Publishing. Inside, a book deal offer. 6 figures. National release. Full press tour. Title suggestion. From Janitor to Justice, the Renee Collins story. Renee blinked, scrolling through the contract. Advance numbers. Tour cities. Options for a docuseries. Her hands trembled. It was real. All of it. The kind of deal that would pay off her mother's house, get her niece into private school, give her control of her story at a level most people never reached. But at the very bottom of the email, she found the clause, the narrative must remain centered on Miss Collins' journey. Due to potential conflict of interest, no significant mention of Miss Sue Holdings or affiliated properties is permitted. Renee's stomach dropped. They wanted her story, but they didn't want Liling in it. She paced her office for nearly an hour, contract in one hand, pen in the other. It was everything she had worked for, and the cost was silence. A sanitized version of her rise, one that erased the woman who had seen her when no one else would. Her phone buzzed. Leiling's name lit the screen. She didn't answer. Not yet. Instead, she sat down, looked at the contract, and started reading again from the beginning. But this time, with different eyes, Renee finally responded to the publisher. Not with a signature, but with a question. What if I told you the real story isn't just mine, and I'm not writing it alone? Just as she hit send, another email came in, from Gerald's legal team. The subject line, intent to seek injunction, defamatory material in upcoming book project. The contract sat open on Renee's desk for 3 days. It wasn't just a document, it was a portal to another life, a version of herself she'd dreamed about in bus rides, in laundry rooms, in overnight shifts spent folding towels while imagining more. 6 figures. Hardcover. Full national rollout. Her face on the cover, her name on shelves. She'd grown up in a house where the hot water gave out once a week, and her mother used to read bills like bedtime stories. Carefully, painfully, and out loud. This money could do things. Real things. Erase debts. Fund scholarships. Start generational healing. But the cost? Erasing Liling. Scrubbing her from the origin story like she was a ghost in a hall that Renee had climbed alone. And that part felt like blood money. She couldn't sleep. The ceiling of her apartment felt like it was caving in with every rejection email she imagined sending, with every check she imagined not cashing. Then on the 4th day she sent a message to Liling. Can we talk off record? They met in the hotel's library lounge, late, quiet, surrounded by leather-bound volumes no one ever touched. Liling sat with her tea, unreadable as always. Renee came in holding the contract. No makeup, no front, just truth. I got a book deal, she said. Liling blinked. I figured it was coming. They want the story, Renee continued. But not all of it. Not you. A pause.
They think it's cleaner that way.
Liling didn't flinch. She sipped her tea. Will you take it? She asked softly. Renee's throat tightened. I don't know. Liling set the cup down gently. Write your truth, she said. No bitterness. No shade. Just calm permission. Even though they both knew what it meant. I'm not asking you to make me a hero, Liling added. But don't let them make me invisible. Renee left that meeting without any answers, but with something deeper than clarity. Conviction. That night, she stayed up rewriting the proposal. She removed the sanitized hero arc. She wove Liling into the structure, not as a billionaire savior, but as the mirror who forced Renee to see herself fully. The new title read, Visible, a story of power, silence, and the women who refused to vanish. The publisher balked at first, but when Renee's lawyer leaked word of the restructured manuscript, and the names involved, pre-orders exploded. By the following week, Oprah's team reached out. A segment. A book club feature.
Then came Hollywood.
Producers. Scripts. Buzzwords like limited series and Oscar potential. The same world that once made her mop floors, now wanted her story in their spotlight. But this time, she chose the frame. And Liling's name remained on every page. The day the first mock-up of the cover arrived, Renee stared at it for 5 full minutes. It wasn't the photo that caught her breath. It was the caption underneath. What they tried to erase became a movement. She smiled. Not for the attention, but because she hadn't sold her voice. She'd expanded it. That evening, with a soft breeze rustling the rooftop plants, Renee returned to the hotel's rooftop, her favorite thinking spot. The sun had just dipped below the skyline, painting Manhattan in layers of orange and shadow. She thought she'd be alone, but she wasn't. A silhouette stood near the edge, back turned, coat flapping slightly in the wind. Renee slowed, recognized the shape before the face. Gerald Marks. He turned as she approached, calm as concrete. "Well," he said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes, "it's quite a view from up here." Renee's heart kicked once, then steadied. "You shouldn't be here." "Oh, I think I should," Gerald replied. "See, unlike some people, I don't hide behind handlers. I don't play victim on camera. I show up." She kept her distance. "Say what you came to say." He stepped forward just slightly. "You think this is a victory," he said. "You and that dragon lady, putting on a little media circus. But I've been in this game longer than you've been alive. And let me tell you, fame is fragile. Public sympathy evaporates. You give the world one more angle, one more scandal, and they'll turn on you so fast you won't even remember who you were pretending to be." "I'm not pretending to be anything," Renee replied. "I just stopped pretending I wasn't worth listening to." Gerald's face twitched. "You've made enemies, in very high places, Miss Collins," he said quietly. "And believe me, they don't like staying invisible either." Before Renee could respond, her phone buzzed. A single message, from an unknown number. It read, "Don't go to tomorrow's press event. They're planning something. This time, it won't just be career damage." The rooftop felt colder than usual. Not from the air, but from something older, sharper, waiting to break. Renee stood alone near the railing, phone in one hand, the anonymous message still glowing on the screen. "Don't go to tomorrow's press event. They're planning something. This time, it won't just be career damage." She didn't know who had sent it. She didn't need to. The tone wasn't fanatical. It was familiar. The kind of warning you give when you've seen too much and can't say more. Behind her, the elevator chimed. She turned, and there he was again. Gerald Marks. Same suit, same arrogance. But his eyes now held a different hunger, not just for control, but desperation. He walked toward her like a man who had nothing left to lose. Hands in his coat pockets, posture stiff with false ease. "You really don't know when to stop," he said. Renee held his gaze. "Then stop showing up," he smiled, slow and sharp. "I warned you. You chose the spotlight. Now you get to burn in it." She didn't move. "Threatening me again?" "Please," he scoffed. "If I wanted to destroy you, I wouldn't be standing here. I'd be sending another envelope. Or maybe leaking a tape. Or pushing just one more story into the bloodstream of America's outrage machine." He took a step closer. "Too close. But I thought I'd give you one more out. One last off-ramp." She said nothing. So he offered the bait. "Retract your statement. Pull the book. Step away from the Institute. You'll get a settlement. NDA. Clean exit. You disappear. I disappear. No harm. No." She raised her phone. "Smile." He blinked. A red dot glowed on the screen. "Live. Instagram. Over 13,000 people watching. And climbing." His eyes went wide. "You're recording me?" "I'm documenting you," she said, voice calm. "Like you documented us. In backrooms. In private memos. Like you documented silence, expecting it to never talk back." Gerald's jaw twitched. "This won't hold in court." She stepped forward now. Closer. "It doesn't have to. It holds in public. In truth, in collective memory." The comment stream exploded. "We see you, Renee. This is what accountability looks like. Arrest him." Somewhere below, police sirens began to wail. The security team had already alerted NYPD. Liling had ordered backup detail for Renee ever since the last threat. The entire rooftop was under surveillance. This time intentionally. 2 officers emerged from the stairwell entrance, hands steady. "Mr. Marks," one called. Gerald stiffened. "You're being detained for harassment, intimidation, and attempted coercion of a public official." Renee didn't flinch. She just lowered the phone. "Let it all play out." Gerald turned to her, eyes wild. "You think you won? You think any of this lasts? The moment the next news cycle hits, no one will remember you." But even as he was cuffed, the sound of the live stream chiming with new viewers overpowered his voice. Over 40,000 watching now. He was wrong. They would remember. Not just her, but what she represented. Minutes later, as the rooftop cleared, Renee stood at the edge, the skyline stretching wide in front of her. Bruised pinks, golds, and early streaks of light. Liling joined her quietly, No words at first, just stillness. Then Liling handed her a thermos. Chamomile, she said. Renee chuckled. You are always 5 moves ahead. I just read patterns, Liling replied. And you shine brightest when they try to dim you. They stood shoulder to shoulder, watching the city awaken. It's funny, Renee said, voice soft. They thought we were invisible. Liling smiled without turning. Until we spoke their language, and our own. The sun peeked over the buildings. Below, New York buzzed, a city alive with rebirth and reckoning. Inside the hotel, the staff moved differently now. Eye contact lingered longer, voices held less fear. The culture was shifting, one unspoken rule at a time. And upstairs on a rooftop, where the war had ended, the victors didn't cheer. They simply exhaled, because sometimes survival itself was the loudest celebration. As the screen fades to black, a single news alert cuts through the silence, bold and unmistakable across millions of phones and laptops. Breaking. Renee Collins named U.S. Ambassador for Cultural Equity by presidential appointment. They tried to silence her, bury the truth, and make her story disappear. But she turned their cruelty into a platform for change. If you've ever been overlooked, unheard, or underestimated, know this: your voice matters more than they want you to believe. Type yes if you believe in justice. Subscribe if this story broke your heart and lit a fire in your soul.